Great. It's 12 noon, and I know we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to kick this off and start our ongoing webinars around the Ready, Set, Relief, Plan Well, Spend Wisely. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I wish we could do it face-to-face, but we're still under a little bit of a limited ability to get in front of people, so clearly Zoom works out really well. So before I start, though, I do want to go over a few logistics and introduce myself. So Arif Qureshi, I'm the president of Building Systems Holding. We are the parent company of ICS, Obernoll Engineering, and CPMI on the construction side, and have been working, as most of you know, for probably the last 30 years in school districts, in municipalities and public sector in helping them improve the infrastructure. And really happy that you could all join us today and get to understand a little bit better in terms of how the funding is working, how things are moving forward. And we're kind of excited to share this all with you today. A few things though, if we can go to the agenda slide. We're also very excited to have some of our elected officials join us today. So I'll introduce them in a little bit. In terms of the agenda today, we will provide you a quick overview of the federal ESSER funding and how that is playing out today. We're going to go into a little bit more detail around the American Rescue Plan and talk about some priorities that need to be established, some of the key considerations, and a communication process. Because anytime that you're getting funding, I think it's extremely important to make sure that you're communicating with your stakeholders on a regular basis. The other piece we're excited about is there are some specifics in terms of how states are managing the funding. So we'll make sure that we have a breakout session and we'll explain to you how to do that as we move forward. If you do have any questions throughout the process, you have the chat function, so please feel free to ask questions. We'll try to answer these if we have time. If we don't, we're going to record all that and send you the answers in a written format. The other item, as you know, if you can just make sure you go on mute so that we can hear the speakers. And we would also like to make sure that on the right-hand top side, there's a view piece. You can click on the view button, and then we'll be able to maybe move to a presenter mode, and that may be easier for everyone to see. So with that, if we can continue. So again, I'm really excited that we have some of our elected officials here today. We also have Todd Rapp, who's the CEO and co-founder of, or founder of Rapp Strategies. And as I mentioned before, communication is always a critical issue for the public sector. So we wanted to make sure that we provide you some good advice in terms of how you can communicate this to your stakeholders. So let me start off by introducing Senator Klobuchar. Really excited to have her with us today. Since her election to the US Senate in 2006, Amy Klobuchar has earned a reputation as an effective and a results-driven legislator, willing to reach across the aisle to get things done. As a consistent champion of students and education, Senator Klobuchar has worked tirelessly to ensure that schools have the resources they need to support the next generation of leaders. As schools have faced, as we all know, new challenges during the pandemic, Senator has been fighting to ensure that students get the support they need and that our schools are adequately funded. In March, she helped secure billions of dollars to the American Rescue Plan to help K-12 schools respond to the pandemic. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce US Senator Amy Klobuchar, and I'll pass on the mic to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Arif, and thank you to all of you. It was fun seeing you in the sort of side gallery view there next to the PowerPoint. So many superintendents and leaders in education. And it is wonderful to be at this ICS webinar. But Arif, I'm still trying to understand what ICS stands for.
It actually stands for Innovate, Collaborate, and Sustain.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Someone told me it was just initials without any meaning, and I thought that just sounds like Washington. So I actually once had a situation where I was applying. I was a law student, and I applied at a DC law firm, and they took me out to lunch, And they were using all these agencies, you know, FTC, FCC, CSPC in the discussions, that I didn't understand most of what they were saying. And finally I thought, well, I'm just going to ask. And at that moment, the guy said, well, that was a real CYA move, you know, cover your ass. And I said, what agency is that? That truly happened. I still got a job offer though, but so it is wonderful to be with all of you, as I said, and to talk through some of the American Rescue Plan funding, but also what the future brings. And Arif is right. I really have made the schools one of my big obsessions during this pandemic in many ways. One was urging the governor to make sure we got those vaccines out to not just the teachers who were so important, but also all the building personnel, because I just kept seeing this lost learning. Some of the schools were going, some were half, when I went around the state and saw what was happening. And it killed me, because some of the private schools that are where I know people in New York City or those kinds of places, they were literally had like tests that some wealthy person would buy for their whole school or something, and the kids would do them every day. And it was just it just was, I know you've heard these stories, but we needed to prioritize our schools and school personnel. And I know that your work on the construction side and figuring out how to transform these communities has touched the lives of students all across our state, from the Twin Cities to Winona, to Laverne, to East Grand Forks, and to Duluth. I know Angie Craig is going to be speaking today. I want to thank her for her leadership. I know Todd Rapwell, he's a good guy. You're lucky to have him. And I also wanted to acknowledge Brainerd Superintendent Lane Larson, who I know is attending today and was just named president-elect of the Minnesota Association of School Administrators. And I look forward to partnering with Lane. So you've been through this challenging year, kids whose lives literally they're, you know, for them, it's what, 10% of their lives sometimes that they've spent now either in the home or going back and forth, missing their graduation or prom and the like. And you've had to be these stalwarts explaining why and explaining how for them to hang in there. And as the Duluth mayor says, we see that lighthouse on the horizon as opposed to light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we're now seeing that right now. In the American Rescue Plan, which I think many of you know, we included $130 billion in funding to help districts to make accommodations for safe in-person learning, prevent layoffs, hire additional educators, and $1.3 billion of the funding is going to go towards supporting the schools in our state. And I heard you guys are going to talk without me on about how you're going to get that out there and how what you want from the state and your districts to get the money in as soon as possible. But we look forward. Ashley's here with me. Here, I'll show her. There she is right there. Hopefully you can see her. Who does our work in this area. And I know that she'll want to work with your leadership on that too, and how we get that money out. I know you've already put some of the dollars to work by replacing insufficient HVAC systems, investing Wi-Fi hotspots, and all kinds of things that are really good. But I also wanted to look forward to the next thing, because I think people are in that mood right now. And before the pandemic, I spent a lot of time, not just in Minnesota, but in the presidential campaign. And I might not have won, but I was the first to do a school construction plan. And spent a lot of time seeing schools with paint peeling off the walls, outdated heating, need for tech labs. And then also one of my other obsessions, how we best have the programs and the equipment, if we need it, to prepare students and the partnerships for the jobs of the future. I don't know how many times I said, running for president, that we're not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. We're going to have a shortage of plumbers and electricians and the like. And I know our school districts in Minnesota have been ahead of the curve working on these issues with community colleges and others, but that's something that I think is exciting. And I know Joe Biden feels the same way. So the president's infrastructure plan, as you know, is major with the $100 billion investment in schools. And also other investments that I think would be really helpful, like a huge, approximately the same $100 billion investment in broadband. But the school money, of course, is about improving ventilation, replacing lead pipes. I visited a school in Yonkers, actually, again, when I was touring around nationally and saw the issues there. I know the issues in Minnesota with so many of our schools in the rural areas, urban, you name it, what we're seeing. And so I think that combination of having a plan, which is about school construction, but also broadband, which would include schools, is really important. Just the horror stories. I met a mom when I was in Fergus about a month ago, whose daughter actually had to take her biology quizzes in the liquor store parking lot in Battle Lake because of the fact that, you know, the broadband where they lived wasn't good enough. And so that's going to be an important piece. And the fact that I lead that bill. So I lead the bill, the broadband bill, the $100 billion bill with Clyburn. He leads it in the House. And I think you all know that the president's very close to Clyburn, and I work with him pretty well too. So that's the bill that they're actually looking at. So we'll make sure that we have the school funding. Status right now is the Republicans have put forward a proposal. Ashley, do you know what they put about? It's about a fourth of what Biden, a little more than a fourth, a third maybe. And the broadband's really good. It's got 60 billion. I don't know about the school piece of it. Maybe she can look. Not so much, she said. And so that'll be a part of the negotiations, because there are bipartisan negotiations going on when it comes to the infrastructure piece of it. So that's what's happening on your end. I'm sure all of you are very focused on, you know, getting the money out right now, getting the money. I know, because I've done calls with your members all over the state. But I just wanted you to know that we're continuing to work on the bigger picture with more to come. And that's really, really important. So I'm just looking through the gallery screen to see all of you, and I can't wait to see you in person. And I want to thank you for all you've done to inform me and our staff. So that always makes us do a better job and gives us the stories, the examples, the facts, the numbers, so that I can go out there and make the case for our schools. And you do that every single day. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for all. I think I've done 10 calls with superintendents around the state, and just what you're dealing with mental health issues, with teachers who are burnt out from the Zoom screens, and then you're trying to find school personnel for the summers, to COVID breakouts, to unfairness and inequality when some parents and families have broadband and some don't. It's really a lot, as my daughter would say. And you've done it all with much aplomb and leadership, and people are looking to you, and you have literally been a bedrock for our democracy when many have failed, including in this building. You have stood up. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your time, and keep up the good fight. We need to make sure we have the right infrastructure to help out. So thanks a lot. Okay. And hopefully when you're around here, we'll take you to some of the schools in terms of how they're really using it.
I've seen some of them here and there through the pandemic, but mostly I've been talking with people, the superintendent. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. See you.
Take care.
Bye.
I'd also like to introduce now Congresswoman Craig. Since 2019, she has been the U.S. representative for Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, where she serves on the Energy and Commerce, Agriculture, and Small Business Committees. She is the first LGBTQ mother in the U.S. Congress and is a fierce advocate for Minnesota's and students' education. Craig has demonstrated that she understands the challenges school systems face and benefits of investing in school infrastructure. She's led and co-sponsored legislation to increase school funding, including the IDEA Full Funding Act and the Rebuild America's Schools Act. She too was a strong supporter of the American Rescue Plan's federal investments for K-12 schools. Congresswoman Craig, please take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Reef. It's such an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon. And my apologies, my background's not quite as nice as our senior senators. I'm in between meetings and actually waiting on votes to be called. So many apologies for that. You know, what's difficult about running for Congress is you can't really communicate in a 30-second TV ad why something is so important to you. But we have 4 sons, and I'm married to a teacher, and we don't get to go into it as much as I'd like to talk about it. But I can tell you this, my background, my personal experience of watching my own mom, who was a single mother, raise 3 kids, mostly on her own, and go to college over 9 years at junior colleges and community colleges and become a teacher, was really instrumental in how I think about our country and how I think about education. So thank you. And of course, it's always tough to follow our senior senator, Amy Klobuchar, because she's much, much funnier than I am. But I have seen a few peeling walls and ceilings in the 2nd Congressional District, but I've also seen some beautiful facilities like the ones we have in Shakopee, the ones we have in New Prague. It's a very much an honor to represent the 2nd Congressional District. I, like Senator Klobuchar, was very proud to support the American Rescue Plan, proud to provide federal funding to help our nation's school districts, and very proud to be a co-sponsor of the Rebuilding America's Schools Act, long supporter of investment in public infrastructure in our nation. And I am optimistic. I know there's ongoing bipartisan negotiations with respect to the American Jobs Plan, and that's the way I think about it. I spent over 2 decades working in 2 healthcare manufacturing firms before I came to Congress, and I believe that the best investment we can make in this country is in education. And I'm on a mission in this Congress, as some of you may know because we featured him in my ads. My oldest son, Josh, went the trade school route, career and technical education, and I am a Congress mother, first and foremost, to my 4 boys, and a huge advocate for career and technical education. In fact, I was just on several calls over the last couple of days where the biggest issue that businesses are asking me about now is finding the right skill set for the jobs that they have. We're back to that old challenge of finding the appropriate workforce. And I personally believe we have got to make sure that our nation's secondary schools are equipped to teach kids that there are lots of opportunities for a good career and a good life, and not every single child for the right path is a 4-year college degree. So I am so proud of the American Jobs Plan. I think we've got an opportunity to get this done in this Congress, and that's going to give us an opportunity, I believe, as the senator said, to put some investment in the final negotiated bill into rebuilding some of America's schools. It really shouldn't matter what zip code you live in this country. And of course, that's one of the challenges we have in our communities, is that if you live in an affluent zip code, you often have access to brand new, beautiful facilities. And if you live in a little poorer zip code from a property tax base, you often find that those schools are not quite as advantaged. So, it's a huge challenge we have to fund education in our country. But my commitment to all of you, and I'm very proud of this work, is that I will continue to advocate for funding for this nation's schools. And beyond that, one of the biggest challenges that my superintendents talk about is the federal government mandate to fund 40% of special education costs. And of course, the cross subsidy is somewhere between 8 and 15% in reality. And this is an area where I will tell you that I've had good partnership with my Republican colleague, Pete Stauber from northern Minnesota. He and I both fundamentally believe that the federal government, if you're going to mandate, ought to have a responsibility. And he and I have co-sponsored legislation, the IDEA Full Funding Act, and we've worked together through the appropriations process to push each of our leadership to fund special education just as much as possible. I know that the superintendents on this call, the teachers throughout my community have had a difficult year. My mom, after teaching all those years at 69, retired instead of going back into the classroom due to this pandemic. And I just want to say finally, thank you to the commitment that each of you have made to our students through these very challenging and difficult times. Our communities and our students deserve world-class facilities, world-class teachers, and a world-class educational experience. And I'm really proud to be part of a Congress that's dedicated to this as a focus. So again, thank you so much. It's a real honor to represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. And as I told Senator Klobuchar, keep up the good fight. We do need the funding. We do need the support from the federal level. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great to
Thanks.
see you.
Take care. So let's continue and talk a little bit more about, I won't cover this, but I think most of you know us. We'll keep going to the next slide just to save some time. As I mentioned before, we're parent company to 3 different organizations. ICS, that's heavily involved in supporting K-12 in terms of their master planning, infrastructure improvements. Obernoll Engineering is a design and engineering firm, and then CPMI is really focused on owner's rep type projects for municipalities, cities, counties, and K-12. Let's talk a little bit about the federal funding overview. We'll talk about ESSER, and in terms of, and I'll just highlight some of the key things that are here. And again, we're going to dig into this a lot deeper when we do the breakout session in each of the different states. So what you notice is, with the CARES Act, you had some significant dollars come in. It was about $13.5 billion, and about 90% was funded to the local education agencies. And then the key dates and times are you must spend those dollars by the end of December of 2021. So you got limited time in terms of being able to leverage those funds, but then also being able to spend those. As you know, that followed with SR3 funding that was actually significantly more at about over $54 billion. And again, those funds need to be spent by 2022, by September, end of September 2022. And then as you've heard some of our elected officials talk about the American Rescue Plan Act, which was passed March of 2021. Overall, 1.9 trillion, but in terms of how it's going to impact public education allocation, it's close to $123 billion. And again, 90% is going to be funded to the LEAs. And those dollars have to be spent by September of 2023. So again, significant dollars flowing into K-12 education. And we'll continue to talk a little bit more about some additional funding as they talked about the infrastructure plan, where there's an allocation of almost $100 billion to help K-12 facilities. Let's talk about the SR3 funding. So as I mentioned before, so March 11th was the timeline when we got the 1.9 trillion in the American Rescue Plan Act, and 122 billion coming to K-12 education. This is by far the largest one-time federal investment in education. And I think it's not just about the fact that you're getting those dollars, but I think it's an opportunity to reimagine how education is delivered and how to really reimagine the entire school process as you go forward. Now, part of this is that 20% is allocated to the LEAs and must be dedicated to learning loss. And at this point, my understanding is about 2/3 of those dollars have been issued to the state, so that those dollars should be flowing through. And the other third will go through the SEAs, so the state educational agency, and they have to submit a plan to receive those funds. So 1/3 of those funds, you have to ask for those, put together the documentation that's needed, and to receive those funds. And then those funds have to be used within a year of receiving it. If you don't use those funds, they actually go back to the federal government and they reallocate those funds to the different states. The other piece that's important is 10% of those dollars are actually used at the state levels. They'll remain at the state level for state level intervention as you move forward. If you haven't noticed, recently, Morgan Stanley put out a report on, as they call it, the super cycle in terms of infrastructure investments. I think this is probably the largest bucket of funding to date. And it includes provisions around improving indoor air quality, social distancing students, and general infrastructure improvements for your school district. One of the challenges I think that most of you will have in terms of receiving those funds is around how you communicate and what the public perception is in terms of that funding. So I think we have to be aware that as you get those dollars, they're great to get those and you can leverage those, but they don't really resolve all the challenges that I think school districts face across the US. So one of the challenges for all of you is going to be how you manage that public perception. The assumption is you're flush with cash. Why do you need more dollars? Why you need additional operating dollars? Or why do you even need additional capital dollars to move forward? So I think it's extremely important to understand that there will be a perception. And then in terms of you able to plan and time this correctly is extremely important. The other piece that I think we all know is this is a one-time cliff issue. This is one-time dollars that you're getting. These are not ongoing dollars. So if you start using them to potentially impact your budget shortfalls, understand that those dollars will not be available in the future. So it's extremely important that you really think through strategically how those dollars will be funded and how you can even leverage those dollars to get more out of it. The other piece is to really spend the time and do some data gathering and do some community meetings or even in-school meetings to really understand what the need really is, and those dollars are used appropriately, and you make those decisions extremely carefully as you move forward. The American Rescue Plan, as you know, significant dollars, and what can you use them for? So there's multiple things that you can use those dollars for. Clearly, repairing and improving school facilities are important pieces to this. As you know, as a part of the pandemic, some of you already done this, but heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems are critical. We know that a lot of those viruses are airborne, and you need to make sure that you're able to provide the right amount of air exchanges, to provide the right amount of filtration as you move forward. But there's other items in there too that are important. Purchasing educational technology, supplies to sanitize or to clean or to filter the air, activities necessary to maintain operation, including continuing to employ existing or hiring new LEA and school staff. What's important also is each state though has some very specific processes in terms of how to get approval and what you need to spend those dollars on. And again, as I mentioned, we'll talk more about this as we break out into those sessions. So we'll talk a little bit about construction IEQ related improvements, because I know we've gotten a lot of questions about how we can use those funds for those. Clearly, you can use those to repair and improve to those areas that contribute or impact virus transmission or other health hazards, right? It's critical that you use it for that purpose. And in terms of air filtration systems, as outlined by the CDC, needed upgrades and repairs to improve ventilation, HVAC systems, and air quality. And I think one of our experts at the University of Minnesota, when he was talking about this, I think he had the absolute right approach to this. And he mentioned that, look, the solution to pollution is dilution. What it really means is you need to bring in as much outdoor air as possible to reduce the potential for exposure for people in these facilities. If you keep moving. And then, as I mentioned, I'd like to pass this on to Todd Raff to talk quickly about the communication process and to avoid some of the pitfalls as you start getting those funding dollars. Todd?
Thanks, Arif, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. You know, I think it's been quite a year and a half, obviously, for any school administrator around the country. And I'm not even sure things are going to feel 100% normal until you start having fans show up for the soccer and football games this fall. But there are going to be a couple of important opportunities this summer that you're going to be able to take advantage of in communications. One of them clearly is back to school time, a chance maybe to celebrate bringing back your community back into your schools. And the second important opportunity is going to be how you use the federal funding from the American Rescue Plan. It's important that you have strong communications for both, and I'm obviously going to talk about your SR3 funding. I would recommend that you have 4 communications objectives that you choose as you build out that plan. The first is that you have early information flow. Now, I think we know that in the pandemic, there seems to be more misinformation and more critics out there, and it may just be the nature of the isolation that's been caused by different state restrictions. The earlier you get out there and communicate with the public, the more you're going to lay the foundation for their understanding of this federal funding, and the less likely it is that others are going to be able to set the narrative for you. The second objective is to build confidence in your post-pandemic transition. We recently did some research and we found that at least in this section of the country, 80% of people, parents, non-parents, it doesn't matter, believe that the pandemic proved that kids have to be back in school every day and get that daily contact with teachers. How you use that ESSER funding is going to be one way you begin to build the confidence that your transition to get those kids back are going to work. The third objective is to re-engage with the community partners. There's no question that in some cases you have lost connections with leaders in your community that have been great supporters of schools. And this is a chance to bring them back to the table. And then finally, you get a chance to bank reputation and trust capital for future work. We all know that school districts have controversial moments, and the more reputation capital that you can put in the bank to leverage in the future, the better off you'll be. Next slide, please. So you need a plan. And as always, the key to the plan is providing a tactical approach for how you're going to communicate with all of your audiences in your district. Put that down on a calendar to help you decide week by week what you need to do, and make sure that you budget both money, but also the resources such as your time or the time of other administrators. You need to budget those effectively. On the left side of the slide, I've identified the 5 key elements that need to be part of all communication. You need to have a purpose and a theme for your projects. The more you can limit it to 1 or at most 2 themes as to what you're trying to accomplish, the easier it's going to be to understand. You need to be able to outline the scope, the amount you're spending on different items in that scope, the timeline for the investments, and then finally the benefits. On the right side, I've identified just some items that you should keep on your checklist to make sure that your communications are complete. You need to have a 30-day posting of the safe return and continuity of instruction plan. And I'd recommend that even those districts that already have a plan approved within their state should still be putting on their website what that safe return and continuity of instruction plan looks like. You should continue to communicate your ongoing infection control steps, because I will guarantee you there will be some level of misinformation out there about student and staff protection. You should be communicating your process that you're using to obtain input from others. And as always, be thanking people for that input. You should be identifying the successes you had from the earlier funding, so this just doesn't become what some people will call a black hole. And then finally, and maybe most importantly right now, how critical it is for teachers and other staff to be effective messengers of your SR3 plan. Teachers and your non-instructional staff are very powerful supporters, but they've also got the potential to be potent critics. Next slide. So then, I'm always thinking about when I'm working with school districts, the fact that there is going to be a level of criticism. And the best way to deal with it is to prevent it and mitigate it from the beginning, as opposed to waiting for the criticism and then somehow you begin to chase it. We're never at our best as communicators when we're chasing. So here's just some of the things to think about. You are trusted communicators. Therefore, the accuracy and the transparency of your information is critical for maintaining those connections locally. It's important for you to build out your partnerships and reintroduce yourself to old partners so they understand what you're doing and they will share it with others. It's critical to create feedback loops, to hear from people, and then make sure, and those superintendents who've worked with me have heard this before, within 24 hours of getting that feedback, you've got a response to people, even if it's just a thank you, and I'll get back to you with more information. You need to make sure that at all times you're focusing on how students will be helped by these investments. Don't focus so much on the details, the technical parts of them. Focus more on the student benefits. And then finally, what we've learned in the pandemic is that any 2 people in your community have different ways that they get information about education. And so you need to have a diverse use of media in order to communicate externally. Don't just rely on your local newspaper. Rely on all the different media that you have that are available to you. So thanks, Arif, and I'm more than happy to, if any of you want to reach out to me, talk a little bit about the plan that you're thinking about, I'm more than happy to give you some feedback and assistance along the way.
Great. Thanks a lot, Todd. And I know you have templates and those kind of things. So I'm sure if anybody need those, we'll have a way to contact you and you can get those. Thank you. So just a high level how we can help. We've really helped a lot of school districts with their communication planning, working with Todd Rapp. So if you need some help, if you need some templates, please let us know. In terms of needs assessments, we'll talk a little bit about that in the breakout sessions. But one of the things we have pulled together is a real detailed checklist. So you don't really need us there. You can actually get that checklist and start planning and assessing your facilities, your needs, and really prioritize what needs to be done. And then if you have solutions to address needs and how you can leverage all the district funding sources, we can help with that. And then implement solutions in accordance with all the state and federal guidelines. You'll notice that we have a group that specifically works around the laws and the statutes and the issues around how that money is spent. There's some are going to require using locally made type of construction materials and so forth. But we want to make sure that you're following those guidelines, you're completing all the paperwork, and we can help with that. And really to internally help you with accounting for the funds. What you'll notice is there are multiple funding sources now, and you're going to have to be able to track and manage that. And depending on the state by state, there's some auditing and requirements around those too. So if you need us, absolutely feel free to contact us. And I want to, as we move into the breakout session, I want to just highlight a comment I got from one of the lobbyists in the Capitol Hill Associates, and I think this is really important for educators to understand, right? We know that, as he mentions, that it is important, the fact that you're all getting this money and this is real good stuff, but in many ways, I think the real work is about to begin. And that in the months and years to come, there's a lot that's going to happen in terms of education. I think on the federal level, on the state level, this pandemic has changed everything in terms of how education is going to be delivered. But at the same time, I think how the educational system will respond is going to be scrutinized. And I think it's really, really important that the educators are really up to the challenge as we move forward. So I think that it's great that we're getting the focus that K-12 needs, but as you know, with any time you get focus, you're also going to get scrutinized. So with that, I want to start kind of passing on to the breakout sessions. So I'm going to pass it on to Sean. So Sean, if you can let everybody know, depending on whether they want to join the Minnesota, Iowa, Pennsylvania, or South Dakota group, how they do that and what's the process around that.